What's going on? It's Ilex Wilder, and this is Wilder with Wilder, and we're just doing some thinking, some talking, all surrounding the NFT space. As you guys know, I'm on the road to blue chip, and as I'm trying to figure out how do I get my first leap, my first foray into the top tier of projects and the best, so that I can get out of the lower tier, move my way through the middle tier, and then springboard up into the echelons. I've been coming across a lot of really great discussions, a lot of really great insights, and that's what kind of leads me to this. There is a great set of tweets by a guy named Rami Ismail, and actually I'm gonna pull that up here right now so that when I get to it, you guys can kind of take a look. The reason for that is I hope it's not gonna have make me sign in, but there's been some really kind of good discussion around interoperability. Now, just to kind of start things off, let's look at the web right here. Interoperability has been one of those topics of discussion that's really come up, especially when it comes to Veve, when it comes to the NFT marketplace, when it comes to being able to move assets around between projects. And if we were to look at the definition right here, it's the capability of a product or system to interact and function with others. The long and short of that means that you would be able to take your character from one NFT universe, transport it over in some fashion to another NFT universe, and be able to have them run around and interact in that fashion. Now, that's a very kind of simplistic one-for-one determination of how it could work. And this is one of those things that people have been talking about for a long time. If you sit in on some of the Disney Veve AMAs and those type of sessions, that kind of comes up. Once we have interoperability, this is going to happen. Once we have interoperability, then we're going to be able to do this, etc., etc., etc. Now, that being said, there really hasn't been much counter argument to that really at all, until someone posted this really fantastic article by Rami Ismail. And it's not really like an article, it's more like a thought experiment. So I linked to it on my Twitter. If you go to the link here inside the YouTube video, it'll take you directly to my retweet of what he put. But basically he did a whole series thread of how he thinks not only is interoperability not happening, but it's downright impossible. Let me see if this is the actual thread. Found it. All right, let's check it out really quick. Okay, so this is Rami Ismail. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He did a thought experiment where he says, okay, this is how interoperability just won't work. And I'm going to use the example of a dice. And so he puts in the parameters, he puts in what it means to the game, and then he kind of does this really intriguing breakdown of when you do all of these considerations of how you design something from a technical perspective. When you're designing something like as simple as a die, you have to consider the size, you have to consider how it interacts with the environment. You have to design the actual cube. You have to give it a scale. So say the scale of the die is 10. Say that the gravity that you develop for your game, so that when the die is rolled, it'll actually act like a real die, is calculated at a certain speed and a certain velocity, and there's certain forces, and then you have these interactions and such. His statement and his thesis from the technical perspective is this die only can function within the context of the game world that was developed. And therefore, interoperability is going to be impossible. Now, this is very interesting in a lot of ways. I think it's really a good idea, especially if you're very bullish on apps like Veve, if you're very, very bullish on just the concept of interoperability, because when we think of the concept of decentralization as consumers, when we think of the concept of decentralization in regards to just NFTs in general, of DAOs, of everybody having a piece, of everybody getting a say, of everybody, having a sense of community and belonging, then we are 100% like, yeah, I want to be able to do whatever I want, wherever I want. I want to be able to take the Back to the Future DeLorean over to the Fortnite Veve world, and then Decentraland, and be able to drive it around and show it off and stuff like that. And that just hasn't been the case, because when you think about game development, right, you can't just take Link from Legend of Zelda and put him in I'm blanking, Metal Gear Solid. Not so much because of licensing. Yeah, there's licensing, but you have to then redesign Link to fit in the context of that game. When they and Link's appeared in different game titles. He's been in Soul Calibur, he's been in Smash Bros, he's been sprinkled out in a bunch of different places, but it's not exactly the same Link. And what Rami is saying is that in order for the interoperability to work, Link would necessarily have to be specifically programmed and designed for these games. Now, he brings up this other topic of when the Frostbite engine became kind of like the industry standard back in the day. And he said that the way that they had to try to do it is that every single character had to have some sort of weapon. Didn't matter if it was a person, a car, a tree. And so whether they needed a weapon or not, you had to somehow program around this weird loophole, because the game engine was designed only to have, first-person shooters or characters would be fighting. And so if you had a puzzle game, you had to kind of work that in. And he said that is child's play compared to what interoperability is actually wanting to be. So I think that this is one of the best articles I've read, even though it's not technically an article. Someone wrote an article about him, and I have that linked on my Twitter as well. Just follow the link to get directly to his page and to the article about him. I'll put both. But the point is, if you want to be bullish, you have to read the counter arguments, because there could be a way to do it. I'm not a game dev. I know a couple of game devs, and them designing the simplest concepts, it takes them months and months and months just to get things to work, just to get things to play consistently, just to get things to actually function and work consistently and not break. And then they realize, oh, I've only been designing this in iOS. Now I have to figure out how to make it for Android, because it breaks when I move it to Android. Oh no, I'm only designing in Unity, so I have to make sure that the person I bring in can design in Unity. There's all these things to consider, because as systems get more and more complex, and we try to get them to act and interact in a realistic feeling way, computers are very, very literal, and they will do exactly what you tell them. I had a buddy who was a computer science major back in the day, and he was like, the computer can only see what you tell it to see, and if you forget to tell it that light exists, it can't see anything. So I think that this is a great thought experiment, and something that we really need to consider, because we're wanting things to be outstanding. We're wanting things to be over the top. We're wanting things to be big, essential, powerful, and that's fantastic. That's great. But it's also good to really understand what the challenges are. Now, the only thing that I could think of is you would need some sort of AI system program that would, say you had two different game systems, right? Say you had Decentraland and then you had Pixelmon. They're kind of similar-y enough to where it's not too crazy, but the worlds are different enough that you know that this system looks different in this system. And one of the things that Rami brought up is that, say in this system, the die is size 10, but in this system, people are size 1. So if you import the die over, suddenly the die is towering over these tiny little people. And so you have to figure out a way to translate that. So the only thing that I could think of, which seems impossible, is some sort of AI intermediary, something in the middle that would read, these are the specifics of this system, these are the specifics of this system. So we're going to break down the pieces and spit out an interpretation. And it would have to do it in a way that a person wouldn't then have to be in and be able to and have to force monitor and figure out on their own, because that's just a lot of sweat equity, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of sitting and focusing on a bunch of stuff that people don't really have time to do. And that's really what the key is. I mean, we're talking about, a wormhole, about space travel. I mean, the problem with intergalactic travel is that, how do you get from here to here when it would take you 1,000,000 years to get to this other galaxy if you were to just follow it along in real time. And so the theories of like warp travel and stuff like that is supposed to kind of bridge the gap to where we're kind of skipping. We're finding a way to jump light speed. That's the whole point. I mean, the only thing that I can think of is somebody developed some sort of AI tech that is the interpretive light speed of the conversion process. Because right now, the way the game mechanics are and the way this game design is, based on the experts, interoperability is gonna be crazy difficult. So obviously, I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but I do want to open a couple of eyes that it's nice to hope, but I don't want to just believe. I would love to know. So, I'm going to keep scouring, looking for the antithesis of this article, looking for someone to do their own analysis, because if you follow the thread, and I really want you guys to read it, he breaks down all the reasons why it can't work, and then all the responses of people being like, well, what if they did this? He then points out a technical reason why that can't work. Well, what if they did like this? Well, they already have that, and it's called amiibos, and so forth and so on. So it's just one of the great thought discussions in our space. So on my road to blue chip, I want to learn as much as possible, pros and cons, highs and lows, positives and negatives. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about more Veve stuff coming up. I'm Ilex Wilder. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, keep chilling, keep searching, and we're gonna get the blue chips together.